So welcome everybody that's already here. Just give me 1 minute to get all the technicalities going. I want to record this for later, so there are people that weren't able to join that can now join. So it looks like it is recording. Okay, great. I'm Aubrey Burke with Taggart Insurance. I'm sure most of you know who I am. And hopefully you can see the screen that we are going to be presenting for the PowerPoint today. And thank you for joining. I know that everyone's probably halfway out the door for holiday activities, but we wanted to get this information to you at least ahead of time so you are prepared for the end of the year and have an opportunity to get a little information for when you come back to work, if nothing else. And I'm going to be sharing the slides on the screen. Today we have Elizabeth Dining, who is my partner here at Taggart Insurance. We're both benefits advisors. And then we also have Jeremy Hertz, who is our Senior Deputy General Counsel at Acrisure in the HR legal team. So he will be, interjecting at some points and is here sort of for our legal backup. I'm going to keep everybody muted until the end of the presentation, just because we have quite a few people joining today. It could be a bit confusing if we get off track with questions. You're also welcome to email me or call me at a later date. I will be in the office today and tomorrow, but I will be out of office all of next week. But Barb and Elizabeth will be in the office next week if we have something urgent. But hopefully by the time we get through this, I'm hoping to calm some fears or concerns. I know there's been a lot of questions surrounding Colorado paid family leave and family, or PFML, is referred to either way sometimes. So hopefully this will answer general questions and kind of give you a timeline of what you need to do, specifically in relation to the private plan opportunity, and that's something that we can help you with in the new year. So without further ado, I will get started here. Like I said on the agenda today, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we know about the law right now, talk a little bit about how that relates to getting a private plan in place, show you a timeline of what we know right now, and then I can open it up for questions. Excuse me. So, FAMLI. This is a law that was put in place, obviously, by the state of Colorado, and that goes into effect of 2023, so in just about a week here. The benefits won't go into place until 2024, but the intention of this is to have paid leave available to Colorado employees for the following purposes: to care for a new child during the first year after the child's birth, adoption, or foster care placement, to care for a family member with a serious health condition, for the worker's own serious health condition, for a qualifying military exigency, and because the worker has need for a safe leave. So I will define those in just a moment here. Claims for these benefits will be filed with the Division of Labor. So I abbreviated that as CODOL in future slides here. If you were to do nothing else, as a Colorado employer, you would be required to register, notify employees of this law and of these benefits, pay the premiums to the state, and the employees would make their claims through the state. So that's sort of the basis of the jumping off point here. This benefit covers virtually all Colorado employers, including state governments, but not federal government employers. Employers with fewer than 10 employees are not required to contribute, but they are required to remit employee premiums. So previously, the guidance was saying, if you have fewer than 10 employees, you can just ignore this. And now they've updated that to say, well, the employer doesn't have to pay anything out of their own budget. They don't have to pay their own portion, but they do have to remit the employee portion. So it's in a sense acting as a tax on both the employee and the employers that have 10 or more employees to pay these benefits. And they're taking the premiums in 2023 to have funds to then be ready to pay benefits in 2024. The benefit applies to all workers who have earned at least $2,500 during a base period, and there is some detail on what that means. Funded by premiums of 0.9% of employee gross wages. So when you look at, before taxes, before deductions, what is the employee's actual total compensation? They are taking 0.9% of that as a total, of which the employer is required to pay half or more, and the employee can pay half. So 0.45% would be the maximum employee deduction that you could take for this. This can be, as I just said, shared evenly between employers and workers, or the employer can choose to fund more than 50% of this premium. And then this is remitted by the employer to the Division of Labor beginning January 1st. However, that's not going to actually be paid, physically paid to the Division of Labor until the end of each quarter. So the important part is that you have a decision on what you want to charge the employees. Is it the full 0.45% as their deduction? Do you want to cover more of that? And you would want to budget that out so that you're prepared to remit those premiums at the end of the quarter. Employers with approved private plans may opt out of this program. So that is in a lot of ways yet to be defined. We know that we can quote private plans, we can apply for private plans. What we can't do yet is actually apply for the opt-out with the state. So that's where we're sort of in limbo. We know that this is a possibility, but because we don't have the mechanism to actually complete the process, the advice is that all Colorado employers just go forward with the status quo, get registered with the state website, begin to take employee deductions if that's what you want to do, and be ready to remit premiums to the state of Colorado, because it's basically to be determined on how we're going to apply for the opt-out and get the private plans in place so that you don't have to pay the state. Right now, we have to just do, status quo.
Yeah, and Aubrey, I want to jump in real quick before we move on. I've dealt with these types of programs around the country as they've cropped up. Massachusetts had one recently that was similar, and really the most important part of these, because they do put a lot of cart before horse when it comes to these things, and so some of the rules and the regulations are decided to some extent on the fly as to how they're going to be interpreted and how they're going to be executed. And so the most important thing in any of these situations when a new program like this starts is to make sure and do whatever administrative steps are necessary to show that you're putting a good faith effort into complying with whatever the program is. So in this case, like Aubrey said, the private plan option is not available right now. They do not have it open to be assessed. It's something that will happen certainly in 2023, I assume. But in the meantime, ignorance is not a defense in regards to that. And so doing whatever the state requires to put the money, to take the deductions, to put the money into the state fund is certainly something that will show that you have a good faith effort to comply. And that's just to make sure that down the line, you don't end up with compliance issues by not having done it, because that won't be an excuse. And so just make sure that even though it's, like I said, a little cart before horse here, that, not everything is clear yet, that you comply to the best of your ability, and that will get you very far in regards to any potential compliance concerns or penalties that could arise.
Great. Yes, thank you. And I will go back again over sort of the timeline and the steps that are important for you to focus right now, because of course you can't, we can't predict everything that's going to happen next year, but we know what the basic steps will be right now. So just to go through a little bit of overview, covered employees, basically, I don't want to read this word for word. I do have reading materials that I've sent out previously, and I can send again, that go into, more details of the overview of the law. But essentially, it's Colorado employees. So if an employee is a resident of Colorado, if your company is headquartered in Colorado, if the employee works remotely, but they are doing work for the headquarters in Colorado or for clients in Colorado, and the majority of their work is happening in Colorado, you can be safe to pretty much assume they are covered under this law. There are some exceptions, you know, if you have remote employees that aren't doing any work related to Colorado, they may not need to be part of this, but we can look through those details later. And it's going to be, you know, essentially any employee that's already earned at least $2,500 in the first 4 of the last 5 quarters. So hopefully when you read it and look at your staff, there may be a few people that you have questions on, and we can look at that. But it's pretty clear, you know, this is a Colorado law. It applies to Colorado residents and Colorado employers.
Yeah, and I think this is a great example of a situation that will be fleshed out as we go further along. You know, when you look at that language there, it says, but the work outside Colorado is incidental to the work in Colorado. Well, they don't define incidental. So what does that mean exactly? We just don't know yet. And from that perspective, what will happen is as time goes on, we'll get a better idea of what that means and how little somebody can be working in Colorado and not have to be covered under this law. That's just something we'll have to find out as time goes on. So those are the kind of things you deal with at the beginning of these statutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the duration of the paid family leave. So under the family program, covered workers may take up to 12 weeks of leave per year, or 16 weeks if it is a serious condition related to pregnancy or childbirth complications. Workers may take intermittent leave in increments of an hour or shorter periods consistent with the employer's leave policies, but the benefits under the program are not payable until at least 8 hours of leave are accumulated. So again, more details are in the documents, but the important part to know is it sort of matches federal FMLA, right? You have 12 weeks of leave, and then in the state of Colorado, you have this additional 16-week leave if it's related to complications of pregnancy or childbirth. The types of leave that are allowed basically fall into 3 categories. So qualifying exigency, which is for people that have military active duty or are being called into active duty and the needs that may surround that. So there are details on how you might define that. A serious health condition, illness, injury, impairment, pregnancy, recovery from childbirth, physical or mental condition that involves inpatient care, hospice, residential medical care, or continuing treatment by a medical provider. I mean, that last line is fairly vague. So again, there's things that are written. There will probably be updates to ways in which you can define that better as time goes on. And then safe leave, which is leave resulting from the worker's family member being the victim of domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, and have sought a court order or medical care, those kinds of things, legal assistance. Again, these are detailed in some of the documents that we have if you want to look more closely. Notices and communications. This is an important part. The part on the right addresses the employer notice obligation. So this is something that is coming up soon, January 1st. And Colorado employers must post a required notice about the family program in a prominent location in the workplace. This is available on their website. Excuse me. Employers will also be required to notify their employees about the program upon hiring or upon learning of an event which may trigger employee eligibility for benefits. There are a lot of resources available on that Colorado Department of Labor, Division of Labor website, which I can show you in a moment. They have a paycheck stuffer, they have webinar slide decks, they have an employee handbook, they have an employer toolkit. So there's lots of things on that website. That's really going to be your home base for learning all of the details about this, registering your company, and getting more materials that you need for these notices. And then as far as the employee notice obligations on the left, basically just says if the employee has a foreseeable benefit or leave, they would give 30 days notice if possible. Of course, that's not always going to be possible. So they're expected to give notice as soon as possible. And in addition, they're saying, well, the employees should try to make this not an unduly disruption to the operations possible either. But the important part here is employers posting these notices and making sure employees know, of course, that you're going to be taking a deduction from their check next year.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of this. It goes back to this good faith. Making sure the notice is up is a great start to be able to do that, to show that you're attempting to comply with this, putting it in the break room or wherever the case might be. I think that's a really important start to this stuff. And ultimately, you're going to get a million questions, and you're not going to have all of the answers when it comes to this statute. But putting that up will at least give employees some understanding of what exactly the requirements are. And if you don't have those answers, then that's to some extent where we can come in with being able to provide some support for you. And the state is going to keep coming out with new bits of information, whether it's FAQs or other things, as this gets further along and they start seeing where the holes are. But in the meantime, making sure that you have the poster put up, making sure that that it's something that's provided to employees, that there's a notice given to them when they get hired. That's an important part of it. If you have some kind of onboarding program, add this to it to make sure that that's in there and that it's consistent with all employees that get hired. Even those that are remote, make sure that it's in there somehow, that might be potentially covered under this. So this is one of those areas where you can really do yourself a really good step in the right direction from a compliance perspective by making sure that these things are done and that they're recorded, that they're being done.
Absolutely. Okay, so the benefits that FAMLI provides, there is a complicated math that I'm not going to try to explain because I'll just confuse you. But essentially, a portion of the benefit that the employee is paid is based on the state average weekly wage. And then a portion of that is based on what they may make in excess of that average wage. And they can take a benefit from more than one job. So if an employee does have two employers, they can file this and get paid from both. As it says here, I'm not going to read it out, but it's a portion of their weekly wage. And there is a calculator on that FAMLI website where you can just put in exactly, what the dollar amount is, and it'll tell you what the benefit would be. It will also tell you what the deduction would be. So that's a really helpful piece in that FAMLI website. If I make, a $50,000 salary, it's going to calculate what that means as a per paycheck deduction and what that means if I were to file a claim for leave. Funding, of course, is happening a year ahead of the actual benefits being available by having the employers remit these premiums. So the total amount of 0.9% of gross wages or payroll, again, can be split between you and your employee, or the employer can choose to pay more than that. And then it's the employer's responsibility to register and provide those payments at the end of the quarter.
And one other tidbit, at least as it stands now, for more highly compensated employees, wages are going to be capped at the Social Security caps. And that obviously is a moving target. That's gone up a lot recently in the past few years. So just keep that in mind. Again, it's not going to be a huge portion of your workforce, but but those that are going to be pushing the cap, that's going to be the max for wage calculation for them, for benefit calculation.
Thank you. Okay. So private plans, this is what we've been getting a lot of questions about, of course. One thing that I've been saying a lot is that, don't feel like there's a rush. Initially, some of the communications that went out were saying that there was a deadline to get a private plan in place before the end of 2022. This is not the case. There's a deadline in 2023 that's out at the end of October to be able to apply for the opt-out and get refunded by the state. But that is obviously a long way. There will probably be some adjustments and some things that we learn along the way. But what is a private plan? Essentially, this is an insurance plan that covers the same benefits that the FAMLI benefits would cover. So if you have that in place, if your current benefits or the benefits that we would quote and add on to your current disability benefits, for example, should cover those same stipulations as the regulation reads. And so we can quote plans with all of our A+ carriers, generally, life and disability carriers like the Hartford, Mutual of Omaha, Principal, One America, Unum, those kinds of carriers are getting prepared. Some of them are already quoting, and some of them will be able to quote this within the next couple of months. As long as you provide all of those benefits, you can then apply for the opt-out, which we don't have a mechanism for yet, but this is the idea. You do have a $500 fee that the state is requiring. Of course, they want to retain some of the income that they might be losing with you going to a private plan. And then they have asked for 60 days to approve your opt-out and get all of that going. So we will see how quickly and efficiently that goes. My hopes are not super high, but there's at least a general framework in place for this. Once you do have the opt-out approved, they can then submit for refunds of any premiums that you've paid during 2023, because you will then have your coverage under the plan in 2024. You are not required by any of the carriers to pay this premium ahead of time. So hopefully what we're thinking is there will be a gap in the end of 2023 where you have started paying the state and doing the things that you're supposed to do. And in the meantime, we quote private plans. You decide on a private plan, we apply for that. We then apply for the opt-out with the state of Colorado. And once that's approved, they can then refund you for what you've paid, and you won't have to start paying premiums with the private plan until January 1 of 2024, when the benefits are actually in place. So it's not like you'll have a double payment period, hopefully, because you'll be getting the money back from the state and you'll start paying in 2024 for the coverage that you will put in place under a private plan. Once you are approved, it says that the approvals will last for 8 years, but there will be annual fees, which we don't know what they are yet, and there will be reporting requirements. We don't know the details of that yet. I can tell you, though, there are definite benefits to doing private plans, as I've discussed with some of you. First and foremost, the rate is more than likely going to be lower than the state rate. Otherwise, you would have no reason to do it. So if your overall rate with the state is 0.9% of payroll, you may get a quote to do it with a disability carrier, like the principal, for example, for 0.7% of payroll. So that's obviously going to save you money. That's going to save the employees money if you choose to still split it 50-50 with the employee. That's the first benefit. Secondly, private insurers are much more likely to be able to process claims efficiently, good customer service. They do these kinds of things day in and day out. We're quoting this with carriers that do life and disability insurance and have been doing that for a long time. We're not going to be quoting this with any fly-by-night carriers or people that aren't experienced. This is just going to be kind of an add-on to what they're already doing. If you currently provide disability coverage to your employees, short-term or long-term, it makes a lot of sense to quote these with your incumbent carrier on those policies, because this will just sort of be an additional benefit or a rider, if you will. It'll be a policy that works in conjunction with your existing disability policy. They will pay whichever the higher benefit is, and they will adjudicate that overlap if there is overlap with your existing disability policy, and therefore they can give you an even better rate for the family coverage. So that's kind of detailed here. October 31st of next year is the date that we're sort of looking at as the deadline to get all of this in place. So we have many months to quote, apply, and get this opt-out in place, assuming the state of Colorado has that mechanism available, which they've said should be between the first and third quarter of next year. We're hoping it's in the first quarter because that's what they had originally said. So I know this one is kind of hard to read, just kind of more into what this actually means for you. So there are 3 important pieces that are timely for you right now. Getting registered with the state on that state website, getting a decision on what you want to charge your employees and having those payroll deductions set up, and then communicating that to the employees, both specifically about what you're charging them and of course putting up the notices or sending out payroll stuffers, putting it on your intranet, however you want to communicate this, as we talked about previously. So those are the 3 main points for you to do by January 1st or in that first week of January to make sure you're, good faith effort to comply, to move forward. This is what everybody is going to need to do. And then we can begin quoting if we haven't already quoted your group for private plans, and we can start looking at that, see which makes the most sense, have some, meetings individually with you and your decision makers about what to do as far as moving forward with a private plan. And when we have that from the state to apply for the opt-out, then you can do that and be on your way. As Jeremy said, this is a moving target. The law and regulations may change, they may be updated, they may be more detailed, and we're of course going to follow that throughout the next year and continue to send you, informational emails, newsletters as we get that information. This is just an example for those that are curious of what we have quoted already with a sample company, for example. So when we've looked at, we get a census of your group with your, basic demographics, and then we need job titles and salaries. And we send this out to bid with, for example, the Hartford, Principal, Mutual of Omaha. In this example, putting it side by side with the state of Colorado, you see that this company has a monthly volume of total payroll of $300,000. So their rate with the state at the 0.9% would be a monthly amount of $2,700, an annual amount of $32,400, and then this can be split 50-50 with the employee. So that would mean a cost of $1,350 per month to the employer or $16,200 a year. That's with the state of Colorado. The Hartford and Principal in this case quoted some very competitive options. The Hartford at 0.534% and the Principal at 0.56%, reducing those premiums per month to around $800 or $840. So you can see there's a large savings to potentially be had. That doesn't mean that your company is going to necessarily have that big of a range, but this is why we would quote it with several carriers. There'll be some that do better in certain industries than others. There'll be some that, depending on your existing benefits, the rate may be lower or higher. And of course, the demographics and the volume of your payroll will affect that number. But these are three carriers that are currently quoting it, and we're seeing some pretty good rates with several of our employers that we've already quoted. One thing to keep in mind is that if you don't have any existing insurance for short-term disability, long-term disability, life insurance, anything like that, these carriers may require that you add a second line of coverage. So they're not going to write the family policy necessarily as a standalone. This isn't to say that all carriers will have this or that will continue to have this policy, but I just like to let you know up front, it may be of benefit to you to look at a traditional short-term and or long-term disability policy, see what the quotes for that look like in addition to the family coverage, or look at potentially life or voluntary life insurance as something that you might want to add on at the same time. And then I've just, again, detailed at the bottom there, these three main benefits. It's a lower cost than the state plan. You're not paying these premiums to the private plan until 2024. And of course, the customer service and claims payment is going to be a lot better on both ends. So this is just the timeline to sort of recap what we've been talking about here. January 1st, a week from today, or I guess this weekend, providing the notices to employees, beginning the payroll deductions, and then start looking at your budget and see if, quoting the private plans makes sense for you, or what private plan options might make sense for you so that you're prepared to apply for that opt-out. At the end of the first quarter, April 1st, 2023, is when you would pay the first set of premiums to the state. And by that point, hopefully, you might have been able to secure your private plan by applying and signing a contract, and then paying the $500 application fee and doing the opt-out with the state. Fingers crossed, we'll be able to do it by then. And if so, then you could start adjusting your employee deductions. So once you have approval for the opt-out, you can either change the deductions or eliminate them depending on, you know, whatever your plan is as the employer of how much you want to pay of that 50% or more. And then October 31st, as I'd mentioned, is the deadline to apply for that opt-out for 2024 and able to get refunded for 2023 premiums paid to the state. And of course, January 1, benefits start to become payable to employees, private plans would go into effect, and the state premium rates are going to be increased. We can probably expect those to increase every year, but they've already said that for 2024, the deduction amount will go to 1.2% of payroll. So definitely a lot of motivation to start looking at this, but I also just want to reiterate, it isn't a huge rush to get this done. You know, you don't have to stress about this over the holidays. The main thing is just making sure that you get the payroll deduction set up, get the notifications out, and get that registration done with Colorado. So that's it for today. I'm sure we will be having another one of these webinars as we get some more updates in the first quarter of next year. I will follow up with an email so I can send you the slide deck. We will have a recording of this presentation, and we have, you know, several other reading materials that go into more details that we touched on today. I've listed the website down here, which is FAMLI, FAMLI.colorado.gov. And then to get to that main page for the employers, it's /employers/family-toolkit-for-employers. I'm sure you can find it if you Google it, but it is on the Colorado government website under the Division of Labor and Employment. So happy holidays. I'm going to open this up. If any of you need to jump off, that's fine. I'm going to try to unmute everybody so that we can open it up to some questions here. So just bear with me a minute while I figure out how to do that. Let's see. Or you can try to type questions into the chat as well, which might make it a little bit more organized. I'm just going to be doing this one by one. So you should be seeing the option to mute or unmute yourself. You'll automatically still be muted. But as I go in and allow you to have that opportunity, you can unmute to ask a question here of myself or Jeremy. Just take me a minute to get down the list of everybody. I'm quite impressed with how many people have joined today. So thank you for taking some time out of your week. I know that it's hard to pay attention to work when we're getting this close to the holiday weekend.
And when it's negative 1,000,000 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That too. This bomb cyclone thing. I thought it was a one-off, but I feel like there's a bomb cyclone every year now. Okay, everyone should have the ability to control your mic at this point. So feel free to pipe in. I'm going to take a look at the chat and see what we've got going on over there with questions. Okay, Brittany asked if the amount to be eligible is $2,500. Does that mean we wouldn't take deductions from new employees until they've reached that amount earned? Or would our payroll companies be able to submit payments on our behalf as they do our other taxes? That payroll question, I don't know. I think that's something you'd need to ask your payroll provider. I'm sure that it is something that, you know, goes officially through state paperwork. So if that's something your payroll provider is able to do on your behalf, that would be wonderful. But I don't really know the answer to that. They'd have to tell you specifically how that would work.
Hey, Aubrey.
Yeah.
This is Julie. I'll just jump in on that if you don't mind,
Sure.
just to answer. They should be able to, if they're willing to go in and be a third-party administrator, they can actually go in and register your company for you, and then they would handle remitting all of the taxes on your behalf. So if they currently remit your unemployment insurance taxes, this is something that they should also be able to remit because it's a very similar process. But they do have to go in, register as a TPA, third-party administrator, and then register your company so they're linked to you.
Thank you, Julie. That's Julie Butler from Concurrent HRO, which is one of our PEO partners that we work with quite a lot. There's also a comment here from another attendee that says, hey, Brittany, we work with Gusto and they've advised that they can provide this support in the filing process. So it sounds like it should be pretty simple for them to do. Or I shouldn't say simple, but available. Erica also said, I would like to know about new hires as well. So I don't know that they've detailed this specifically in the materials that we have. I just know that what it says about the eligibility for the employees being able to take the benefit or to be deducted would be that they've had, you know, a $2,500 worth of income. So Jeremy, I don't know if you know, is there a starting point at which you start taking those deductions? Or is this just something kind of up to interpretation and make your best guess?
I don't know the exact answer to that yet. This is one of those things, but my thought would be that the $2,500 is the threshold for them to be able to start taking those benefits, but that the deduction, they still have to pay in ahead of time is my thought. That's how most of these programs work. So when they become an employee, they should start receiving the deduction or having the deduction taken from them. But for them, they need to be able to have met those minimum thresholds to be able to ultimately receive the benefit once it starts being handed out. It sort of goes back to the idea of you got to fill up the coffers first. You know, whether it's in the first year before you can get benefits or even down the line once benefits are available, you have to be able to put some money in before you can actually get money out. And I guess the thought is there, if you haven't put anything in, you shouldn't be able to take anything. And so I think the sort of the common sense approach to that would be that the deduction should be taken as soon as they're hired. And then they can start taking the benefits once they put a few bucks in. I think that's how you should look at it.
Thank you. Anybody else? I know it's a lot of information to process right now. Well, I will leave with the note that, you know, again, I am not going to be in the office next week. Hopefully, a lot of you are taking some nice time for the holidays to relax and recoup. And then when we start in on the new year, we'll definitely be able to start looking at quotes. If we haven't already looked at quotes for your company, it may be something that we want to quote again after we've got a couple months under our belt and we're seeing how things are going time-wise with the state's mechanism to opt out. But the first place that we'll look is any incumbent carriers that you may have if you already have disability coverage or life insurance coverage. And it should be a fairly simple process. Once that decision is made, we just look at the rates, you know, and we can make a pretty easy decision because there aren't a lot of details. The plan is going to match what the state plan is. So it's not like they're premium levels or lower level. That's just covering the family regulation will be a standardized plan that we can look at rates for and we can get paperwork done for in the early part of next year. Brittany did ask last question. The slide asks about refunding money. So we have to put it in initially, even if we're going to go with a private plan. How do we go about refunding employees? That's a great question. You do want to go ahead and move forward as though, you know, because we don't know what the private plan situation is going to look like or when it is going to be in place. You're going to want to start taking those deductions from employees if that's your decision, and to be ready to pay those premiums at the end of the first quarter to the state of Colorado. We don't know exactly how that's going to work. We know that Colorado has said they will refund you as long as you apply and get approved for this opt-out, but we don't know how quickly that happens. We don't know what that looks like. These are some of the details that are just going to kind of play out for all of us as we go along.
Yeah, and I think it's a good question for your payroll provider. you know, just to sort of put that in their wheelhouse a little bit, just because it's not going to happen immediately. The one thing we do know, of course, is with any situation like this is you're asking the right question, because the refund has to occur. And so administratively, however you're going to do that, again, that's probably initial discussion with the payroll provider just to see how they could possibly work through that. But just, you know, again, keep in mind that if the refund does occur, if you start with the state and then go to a private plan and they're going to refund you the money, that somehow or another, whether it's a hard check or whether it's through the system or whatever it is, the employees would have to get their money back, you know, to be able to make that compliant. So that's just a question you can ask early, and hopefully we'll have some decent answers from the payroll providers as to how they see that might work.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would imagine once you have that check in hand, you could either, you know, do a add-on to the employee checks, or you could just reduce any future deductions that you may be taking by the amount that's been refunded, something of that sort. But we'll wait for some guidance on that and see what the payroll providers suggest. Anybody else want to pop in? Okay. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope everybody has a wonderful holidays, Christmas, Kwanzaa, New Year's, Hanukkah, whatever it is that you celebrate. I hope that you get some good family time, some good downtime, and we will talk to you, I'm sure, in January more about this. And I will send this slide deck out to everybody, as well as some additional materials that you can read in your free time, whenever that may be. And just let me know if you have any questions. Thank you, and thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Aubrey. Thanks, Jeremy.
Aubrey.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.